In 1882, New York City is full of excitement, change, and social tension. Marion Brooke, a young woman from Pennsylvania, is left with no money after her father dies. She moves to live with her wealthy aunts, Agnes Van Ryn and Ada Brooke, in a grand house on Fifth Avenue. Her aunts come from old money and care deeply about tradition and reputation. Right across the street, a new and flashy mansion is bought by the Russell family. George, a powerful railroad tycoon, his ambitious wife, Bertha, and their children, Larry and Gladys. The arrival of this new money family upsets Agnes, who believes in strict social rules. On her way to New York, Marion meets Peggy Scott, a smart and talented Black woman who wants to be a writer. Peggy helps Marion when she can't pay for her train ticket, and they become friends. Soon, Peggy gets a job as Agnes's secretary. While Bertha tries to throw a fancy party to impress high society, her efforts are rejected. At the same time, George uses his power and business skills to beat his rivals. Oscar Van Ryn, Agnes's son, returns from Europe with a secret romance and big ambitions. The season begins with all the characters trying to find their place in a city where money and class don't always agree. As time goes on, the struggles between old traditions and new ambition become even more intense. Marion starts falling for Tom Rakes, her family's lawyer, who is charming but possibly after her money and status. Agnes warns her not to trust him, but Marion wants to believe in love. Peggy secretly meets with Tom to get legal help so she can be free from her strict and controlling father, showing that she has a painful past she doesn't talk about much. Meanwhile, George works out a shady business deal with a corrupt city official, Patrick Morris, hoping to push his railroad project forward. Bertha, always thinking ahead, plans to join high society by organizing a charity event. Oscar, who is hiding his relationship with another man, sees Gladys Russell as a way to gain wealth and social power. Ada, quiet and kind, starts reconnecting with someone from her past, which reminds her of the life she never had. At Bertha's event, some people start to warm up to her, but Mrs. Astor, the most powerful woman in society, still refuses to accept her. George's risky business plan begins to fall apart, and Marion becomes more emotionally attached to Tom, which sets her up for future disappointment. Things take a dark turn when George's railroad deal backfires. The aldermen who promised to support him change their minds, then change back again, causing chaos. George strikes back by playing the stock market and destroys Morris financially. This leads to Morris taking his own life, shocking everyone. Marion keeps seeing Tom in secret, and Agnes becomes more suspicious. Peggy starts working as a journalist at the New York Globe, where she meets respected editor T. Thomas Fortune. She is excited, but the road ahead is difficult due to racism and sexism. Bertha tries to use her new connection, Aurora Fane, to improve her social standing, but many still look down on her money. Oscar continues flirting with Gladys but keeps his true intentions and secret life hidden. Ada quietly starts to stand up for herself. Tensions grow inside Agnes's household as people begin to question her authority. The story continues to build with betrayal, secrets, and ambition pushing everyone to their limits. Bertha continues fighting for her place in high society. She finally gets invited to a party in Newport, where the richest families spend their summers. There, she impresses some important people like Mamie Fish and Ward McAllister, but Mrs. Astor still ignores her. Back in New York, George is in trouble because one of his trains was involved in a deadly crash, and now he might face a lawsuit. Marion's love for Tom grows stronger, even though more signs show that he might not be trustworthy. Peggy's painful past is revealed. She was once married, nearly died while giving birth, and her father forced the marriage to be erased from records. Now, she feels stronger and more focused, but the Van Ryn household remains full of quiet racism, especially from Armstrong, the maid, who treats Peggy unfairly. Oscar keeps pushing to marry Gladys, but his secret relationship threatens to ruin everything. Ada starts spending more time with Mrs. Chamberlain, a widow with a scandalous past, which worries Agnes. The story continues to show how personal secrets and social games are closely connected, as everyone tries to protect their place. Soon, Bertha decides to throw a big Red Cross charity event and invites Clara Barton, the famous nurse and speaker. She brings along Marion, Aurora, and Peggy to help, hoping the event will finally convince society to accept her. Some people begin to come around, but Mrs. Astor is still cold. George's legal troubles get worse, but he tries to protect his image with smart public moves. Marion starts to notice Tom's ambition and questions whether he really loves her. Peggy is attacked with racism by Armstrong, and her position at the Van Ryn house becomes uncertain. Meanwhile, Oscar's plan to marry Gladys is challenged when John Adams, the man he secretly loves, also shows interest in her. Maybe just to get revenge. Ada's friendship with Mrs. Chamberlain grows, upsetting Agnes. George's son Larry, instead of joining the railroad business, dreams of becoming an architect, which causes tension with his father. The drama increases, as Charity becomes just another battlefield for power and status. The Russell family's maid, Turner, tries to seduce George in hopes of gaining more influence. George rejects her, but Turner isn't finished scheming. Marion becomes more serious with Tom, even though everyone warns her. Peggy's writing career begins to shine, but her father still tries to control her life. Bertha makes progress in Newport, winning over Mamie Fish, but still can't win over Mrs. Astor. Oscar's efforts to win Gladys's hand start to fail, especially as her mother becomes more protective. George goes to court over the deadly train crash, and although he wins, the memory of Morris's death continues to haunt him. Ada quietly starts pushing back against Agnes's control, while Armstrong becomes more openly hostile to Peggy. Everyone seems to be fighting a private battle, and the season continues to show how closely personal choices are tied to public consequences. As electricity begins to light up the city, New York enters a new era of progress. George hosts a fancy event at the new train station, showing off Thomas Edison's electric light bulbs, but Bertha forgets to include Marion in her guest list, claiming there wasn't enough room. Marion is deeply hurt and secretly goes to see Tom. Peggy's articles in the Globe gain attention, but Armstrong tries to ruin her reputation. Bertha's social rise stumbles again when Mrs. Astor still refuses to acknowledge her. Oscar's railroad investment plan crashes, showing that he's reckless and greedy. George's court victory strengthens his business position, but arguments with Larry show cracks forming in the family. Ada shows support for Peggy, even though Agnes disapproves. There's beauty and progress everywhere, but underneath, betrayal and disappointment are growing. In Newport, life seems perfect on the outside with fancy tennis matches and rich people at casinos. But there's trouble underneath. Bertha keeps trying to win the respect of the high-class crowd. She makes some progress, but gets into a fight with Mrs. Astor about who owns what in Newport. George is distracted because Turner, the maid, continues causing problems. Marion plans to run away with Tom and marry him in secret, which shocks Ada and Aurora when they find out. Meanwhile, Peggy discovers her baby, who she thought had died, is actually alive. She feels betrayed by her father and decides to search for her child. Oscar's plan to marry Gladys begins to fall apart, as John Adams gets in the way again. Larry keeps working on his dream of becoming an architect, refusing to follow in George's footsteps. At the Van Ryn home, both Ada and Peggy begin pushing back against Agnes's rules. The show continues to show how behind every party and fancy dress, there's heartbreak and struggle. The season ends with a huge event, Bertha's grand ball, which is her final attempt to prove she belongs in high society. With George's help, they pressure Mrs. Astor into coming to the ball, and her appearance finally earns Bertha the respect she has been chasing. It's a big win, but not everyone is celebrating. Marion's dreams are crushed when Tom leaves her for a rich heiress, showing he only cared about status. She is heartbroken. Peggy and her mother begin their journey to find her son, now determined to take control of their future. Oscar's financial lies are revealed, leaving him broke and exposed. Larry and Marion start to connect, hinting at a possible romance. George may have won the business war, but his family is starting to fall apart. At the Van Ryn house, Ada and Marion begin to stand up to Agnes, who no longer has full control. The season closes with grand parties and beautiful clothes, but also with change, pain, and new conflicts waiting to begin. Review. The Gilded Age Season 1 is a rich and stylish show that tells the story of power, class, and personal dreams in 1880s New York. Created by Julian Fellows, who also made Downton Abbey, the show focuses on how old money families clash with new ones, especially when it comes to who belongs in high society. It's filled with grand mansions, fancy balls, and complicated relationships. At the same time, it shows deeper issues like racism, control, and the pressure to follow strict social rules. The characters are all trying to move forward, but they're often held back by the world they live in. One of the best things about the show is its cast. Carrie Coon is powerful and emotional as Bertha Russell, a woman who will do whatever it takes to be accepted. She's not just greedy, she's determined and brave. Christine Baranski is excellent as Agnes, the older woman who uses sarcasm like a sword. Danae Benton shines as Peggy, showing what it was like for a smart black woman to try to make a name for herself in a time full of unfairness. The costumes and sets are amazing. You feel like you're really living in 1882. The writing balances drama and real history well, and by the end, the stories of love, loss, ambition, and power all come together in a big, satisfying way. Still, the show isn't perfect. Marion, played by Louisa Jacobson, is supposed to be one of the main characters, but her story feels weaker than the others. Her romance with Tom isn't very exciting, and her character often feels confused or passive. Some storylines, like the maid-turner's attempts to seduce George, don't really go anywhere. Also, the show sometimes brings in famous historical people like Thomas Edison or Clara Barton, but they feel more like decorations than real characters. The show also doesn't fully explore how unfair society was, especially for people like Peggy, and this softens some of the impact. Overall, The Gilded Age is an entertaining and dramatic show with a lot of heart and beauty. It mixes gossip and power plays with real emotions and smart characters. While it has a few weak spots, the strong performances, amazing design, and interesting stories make it a must-watch for anyone who loves historical dramas. If you enjoy shows about secrets, fancy events, and strong women breaking rules, then this series is definitely worth your time.